At 11:48 p.m., I heard the sirens. Not for me, for my son and his wife. Hours earlier, I had done the unthinkable. I pressed charges. If you're a parent, you'll understand why. My name is Lisa Thorne, and at 62, I thought I'd seen it all. In this life, joys, sorrows, quiet victories, and inevitable disappointments. What I never imagined, and what no mother could ever comprehend in her darkest fears, was that the very love I poured into him would be exploited, twisted into a betrayal so profound that it would destroy the foundation of my trust and force. Me to make an unthinkable choice. If you're watching, subscribe to the channel and comment on which city you're watching from. I've built a life based on resilience and love, especially for my only son, David. My greatest desire has always been to provide him with a foundation of security and unconditional affection, to provide everything I could so he could soar toward his own successful future. I've always envisioned my final years filled with the simple pleasures of family, meals together, laughter on holidays, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing my son happy and successful. My life, before the devastating realization, was a tapestry, woven with threads of quiet strength and steadfast dedication. I grew up in a bustling working-class neighborhood in Chicago, where every dollar was earned through honest sweat and communal bonds were forged in shared struggles and celebrations. My parents, immigrants who arrived with little more than hope, in their hearts, instilled in me the invaluable lessons of perseverance, integrity, and the sacred importance of family. My father, a foreman in a local factory, taught me the dignity of hard labor and the pride of craftsmanship. My mother, who managed our household with a budget as tight as a drum, showed me how to find richness in simplicity and joy in everyday moments. Our modest home was always filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals, the lively chatter of relatives, and the warmth of unwavering support. It was there that I learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in the strength of character, the kindness of heart, and the bonds that tie us to one another. I carried these values with me throughout my life. After graduating from college with a degree in education, I became a dedicated elementary school teacher, a profession I cherished. There was immense joy in shaping young minds, in fostering curiosity and empathy. My career, while not financially extravagant, provided me with a comfortable living and, more importantly, a profound sense of purpose. I met Michael, my late husband, during my early teaching years. He was an engineer, brilliant and kind, with a gentle humor that perfectly complemented my earnest nature. Our love story was one of quiet understanding and shared dreams, a partnership built on mutual respect and a vision for a stable, loving family. Our son, David, arrived a few years into our marriage, and from the moment I held him, he became the sun around which my world revolved. My life transformed into a symphony of motherhood, lullabies, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the immense pride of watching him discover the world. Michael and I poured every ounce of our love and resources into raising David, ensuring he had every opportunity to flourish. We saved diligently, not for ourselves, but for his education, his future, his happiness. When Michael passed away unexpectedly from a sudden illness, the loss left an unfillable void in my heart. The grief was a heavy cloak, but the fierce love for David became my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward. I channeled my sorrow into ensuring that Michael's legacy of love and provision for David would continue. I worked extra hours, managed our finances with even greater precision, and guarded Michael's small inheritance carefully, all with David's future at the forefront of my mind. I was the silent guardian, the unwavering protector of his path. David grew into a charming and intelligent young man, possessing a magnetic personality that drew people to him. He attended a reputable university, fueled by my financial support and my unwavering belief in his potential. He had a natural flair for design and entrepreneurship, which excited me. I imagined him building something wonderful, a life rich in purpose and creative fulfillment. But with his innate charm came a subtle undercurrent of entitlement, a soft assumption that things would always work out for him, often with a little help from me. It was a pattern I, in my maternal devotion, unknowingly nurtured. My support wasn't just financial, it was an emotional safety net, cushioning him from every setback, making his path perhaps too smooth. It was during his final year of university that David met Clara. She was a whirlwind of dazzling ambition and impeccable style, a social media influencer with an eye for luxury and an unshakable belief in her own destined prominence. Clara came from a family with a comfortable, though not immense, fortune, and she carried herself with an air of sophisticated confidence that could be both captivating and, to me, a little unnerving. I remembered our first meeting clearly. She complimented my home, my clothes, my son, with an effusive warmth that felt a fraction too practiced. There was a glint in her eye, a shrewdness that registered somewhere deep within me, a tiny alarm, bell I chose to ignore. David was utterly smitten, completely enchanted by her vivacity and drive. And so, with a hopeful heart, I welcomed Clara into our lives, pushing aside my nascent reservations for the sake of my son's happiness. As their relationship blossomed, Clara's influence on David became more pronounced. Their lifestyle rapidly escalated beyond what David's entry-level marketing job, even combined with Clara's nascent influencer earnings, could realistically sustain. They rented a chic, overly expensive apartment in a trendy part of the city, furnished it with designer pieces, and embarked on lavish trips that filled Clara's Instagram feed with aspirational content. I found myself increasingly subsidizing their lifestyle, not through direct requests initially, but through a series of loans for unexpected expenses, gifts for special occasions, and eventually regular financial assistance to help them get on their feet. David, always charming, would explain their latest predicament with an optimistic shrug, while Clara would offer a dazzling smile and assurances that their big break was just around the corner. I wanted to believe them, wanted to believe that my contributions were truly helping them achieve their dreams rather than simply maintaining a facade of luxury. My financial contributions became a quiet, constant hum in the background of their lives, like an invisible stream of wealth that flowed directly from my diligently managed accounts to theirs. I covered a significant portion of their rent, paid for their high-end car leases, and even settled their escalating credit card bills when they became overwhelming. "Just until your careers take off, darling," I would tell David, though the takeoff seemed perpetually delayed. Clara, for her part, had a remarkable ability to transform any conversation about money into a discussion about investment in their brand or future. She would speak of networking events, expensive wardrobe choices as necessary for her image, and luxury vacations as content creation. David, meanwhile, seemed to float through it all, benefiting from the comfort my money provided, seemingly oblivious to the silent sacrifices I made to maintain their opulent illusion. Among my most cherished possessions was a small, ornate wooden jewelry box, handcrafted by my father for my mother on their first anniversary. It sat on my dressing table, a constant reminder of their enduring love and my humble beginnings. Inside, nestled on velvet, were the few pieces of jewelry I truly valued. There was my mother's pearl necklace, a string of luminous, perfectly matched pearls that she wore on every special occasion, a symbol of quiet elegance and grace. Then, my engagement ring, a sapphire encircled by diamonds, a testament to Michael's deep and steady love. And finally, a delicate gold locket holding tiny faded photographs of my parents when they were young, and a lock of David's baby hair. These weren't extravagantly expensive pieces by modern standards, but their sentimental value to me was immeasurable. They were tangible links to my past, to the people who had shaped me, and to the love that had defined my life. They were my legacy, meant someday for David, a transfer of history, not just material wealth. I rarely wore them, keeping them safe, a quiet treasure in my otherwise practical life. The last time I remembered clearly seeing the jewelry box undisturbed was about 3 months before the incident. David and Clara had visited for a weekend, ostensibly to catch up and share a homemade meal. Clara, ever curious, had admired the antique dressing table. "Oh, Lisa, this is simply divine. So much character. What beautiful things do you keep in here?" she had asked, her eyes lingering on the wooden box. I, ever open and trusting, had smiled and explained the significance of its contents, even showing her the locket. She oohed and awed, praising the vintage charm of the pearls and the classic elegance of the sapphire ring. A shiver of unease ran through me then, a faint echo of that initial alarm bell, but I dismissed it as paranoia. She was my son's wife, family. Over the next few months, their financial demands escalated sharply. Clara's influencer career seemed to hit a plateau, and David's consulting projects were not materializing as quickly as they had boasted. The calls became more frequent, more urgent. "Mom, we need to make payroll for Clara's assistant. It's really critical for her brand," David would say. Or, "Lisa, the landlord is being ridiculous. We need to cover the outstanding balance immediately to avoid a penalty." I found myself dipping into my long-term savings, the money I had set aside for my own modest retirement, to keep their extravagant charade afloat. Each time I felt a growing knot of anxiety, but the thought of David struggling, of Clara's public image crumbling and dragging him down with it, always prompted me to write another check, to make another transfer. My hope, always, was that this latest crisis would be the last, that they would finally find their footing. Then came David's 30th birthday. I planned a small, intimate dinner at my home, just the three of us. It was meant to be a moment of quiet celebration, a chance to reconnect. Clara, however, had other ideas. She insisted on transforming it into a sophisticated soiree with a guest list of her important industry contacts. The evening became a blur of unfamiliar faces, loud music, and a general air of performative glamour that felt utterly alien to my modest home. During the party, Clara, with a glass of champagne in hand, had cornered me by the kitchen. "Lisa, darling," she cooed, her voice a little slurred, "you know David and I are trying to establish ourselves, to project a certain image. These old-fashioned pieces you have, the pearls, the ring, they're lovely, truly, but perhaps a bit dated for our current aesthetic. Have you ever thought of updating them? Or, selling them and reinvesting in something more contemporary? It could really help us, fund our next big project." I felt a cold dread creep into my stomach. I politely, but firmly, explained that those pieces were sentimental, irreplaceable, and not for sale. She gave a dismissive shrug, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Well, a thought, darling," she said, before drifting off to another guest. The conversation, though brief, left a lingering, unsettling feeling. A few weeks after David's birthday, I noticed it. The small, ornate wooden jewelry box on my dressing table was slightly ajar. My heart gave a sudden, painful lurch. I remembered distinctly closing it after tidying up just that morning. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. The velvet interior, once home to my most treasured keepsakes, was empty. The pearl necklace, the sapphire engagement ring, the delicate gold locket, all gone. A cold wave of shock washed over me, instantly followed by a sickening wave of dread. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't just a robbery. It felt deeply personal. No forced entry, no other items disturbed, only the jewelry box. My mind, in a desperate attempt to deny the impossible, raced through possibilities. Had I put them somewhere else? No, never. I was meticulous with those pieces. I called David, my voice tight with a fear I tried to conceal. "David, have you or Clara been in my jewelry box recently? I can't find my pearls or my ring." There was a beat of silence, a fraction too long, before his voice, strained and a little too quick, came through. "Mom? No, of course not. Why would we? Are you sure you didn't just misplace them? You know how you are with your things, always moving them around." The last part was a blatant lie. He knew how careful I was with those particular items. A cold certainty began to settle in my gut, heavier than any fear. I'm certain, David. They're not here. He promised to keep an eye out and ask Clara, but his tone was evasive, lacking any genuine concern. Over the next few days, the answers I sought from them were met with a frustrating wall of denial and deflection. Clara, when I finally reached her, sounded irritated. "Lisa, really? Are you accusing us of something? We were at your party, yes, but we certainly weren't rummaging through your personal belongings. That's quite an offensive suggestion." Her tone was sharp, her practiced sweetness entirely gone, replaced by a defensive snappiness. David, meanwhile, became distant, his calls unanswered, his texts curt and dismissive. He was avoiding me, and in that avoidance I found my confirmation. They knew. They had done it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My own son and his wife had stolen from me, not just any possessions, but the most cherished, irreplaceable heirlooms, symbols of my parents' love, Michael's devotion, and David's own childhood. The monetary value, though significant, paled in comparison to the gaping wound of betrayal that now festered in my heart. The trust, the years of sacrifice, the unconditional love, it all felt like a foolish investment that had been ruthlessly plundered. I paced my home, the silence deafening, the emptiness of the jewelry box mirroring the void growing inside me. How could my son, the boy I had nurtured and protected, do such a thing? How could he align himself with someone who showed such callous disregard for my feelings, for our shared history? The tears came then, hot and bitter, not for the lost jewelry, but for the shattered image of my son and the agonizing truth of his profound ingratitude. For days, I was paralyzed by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, profound sadness, disbelief, and a crushing sense of loneliness. The idea of involving the police, of turning my own son and his wife over to the authorities, was abhorrent. It went against every maternal instinct, every fiber of my being that had always sought to protect him. I imagined the scandal, the public shame, the irreversible damage to our family name. "No, I can't," I whispered to myself countless times, my voice hoarse with anguish. "I simply can't do that to David." But then another voice, smaller but resolute, began to speak within me. It was the voice of my parents, echoing their lessons of integrity and dignity. It was the voice of my own self-respect, demanding recognition. This wasn't just about a few pieces of jewelry. It was about a fundamental violation of trust, a calculated act of disrespect that went too far. It was about allowing myself to be continually exploited, to be treated as a limitless resource rather than a person with feelings and boundaries. The cold, hard truth was that David and Clara had crossed a line that had to be acknowledged. If I let this go, what would be next? What other boundaries would they disregard? My silence would be interpreted as weakness, an invitation for further exploitation. The pain of taking action would be immense, yes, but the pain of inaction, of allowing this betrayal to fester and erode my spirit, would be far greater. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with my conscience. The images of my mother's pearls, Michael's ring, and David's baby locket flashing before my eyes, each one a silent accusation. By dawn, a steely resolve had replaced my indecision. My heart ached, but my mind was clear. This was not just for me. It was, in a twisted way, for David too. He needed to confront the consequences of his actions, to understand that love does not equate to endless enablement. With a heavy heart but a firm hand, I picked up the phone. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the local police department. Explaining the situation was agonizing, each word a shard of glass in my throat. "My name is Lisa Thorne," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. and I need to report a theft. My jewelry, it's been taken, and I believe I know who took it." The officer on the other end, calm and professional, listened patiently as I recounted the details. The missing items, the subtle questioning of Clara, David's evasiveness, the feeling of utter certainty. I provided them with a detailed description of the pieces, their approximate value, and the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. I also, with a deep breath, gave them David and Clara's names and their address. The gravity of what I was doing was not lost on me. Each piece of information I shared felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of my illusion of a perfect family. The officer assured me they would investigate discreetly, but that given the nature of the items and the potential suspects, an immediate visit might be necessary. I hung up the phone, my hand still shaking, the silence of my home now, echoing with the sound of my own profound, irrevocable decision. The hours that followed were an eternity. My house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a holding cell for my racing thoughts and splintered heart. I replayed every interaction with David and Clara, searching for clues I might have missed, for a sign that could have averted this catastrophe. Had I been too generous, too trusting? Had my unconditional love inadvertently blinded me to their true characters, or perhaps nurtured a monster of entitlement? The questions spun relentlessly in my mind, each one a fresh lash of self-recrimination. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I imagined them, my son and his wife, in their luxurious apartment, oblivious to the storm I had just unleashed, perhaps enjoying a gourmet meal or planning their next lavish escape, funded indirectly by the very heirlooms they had stolen. I envisioned Clara, with her perfectly sculpted nails, scrolling through her phone, David laughing beside her, both utterly convinced of their impunity. As darkness fell, deepening the shadows in my quiet home, my phone remained silent. No frantic calls from David, no outraged texts from Clara. They were still in their bubble of ignorance, enjoying what they believed was a peaceful evening. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that peace was about to be shattered. I pictured the scene, the knock on the door, the flashing lights, the shock on their faces as they realized the extent of their miscalculation. It would be a brutal revelation, a stark confrontation with the reality they had so arrogantly dismissed. And as the clock on my mantelpiece ticked steadily towards midnight, a new sound began to filter through the quiet street outside my window, the faint, unmistakable wail of distant sirens growing steadily louder, closer. They weren't coming for me. They were coming for them. The police were on their way. The distant wail of sirens, once a vague, unsettling sound, grew into a piercing reality, its pitch rising and falling with an alarming proximity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. I rose from my armchair, drawn by an invisible force to the window. Peeking through the blinds, I saw the flashing blue and red lights painting my quiet street in stark, pulsating colors. 2 patrol cars pulled up the block, slowing as they neared David and Clara's building, just a few streets over. My stomach clenched. They were there. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I didn't watch the actual scene unfold. I couldn't. The thought of David, my son, seeing those lights, those officers because of me, was a pain almost too sharp to bear. But a part of me, the part that had hardened in the face of their betrayal, felt a chilling, almost grim satisfaction. They had chosen this path, not I. I had merely pointed the way to the consequences they had so blithely ignored. I turned away. From the window, the silence in my home now heavier, pregnant with the echoes of sirens that had just passed. I spent the rest of the night in a restless stupor, unable to sleep, consumed by the internal battle between maternal love and a newfound fierce sense of self-preservation. The next morning, the phone rang, jarring me from a fitful sleep. It was David. His voice was raw, laced with disbelief, anger, and a desperate panic I had never heard before. "Mom, what did you do? The police were here. They searched the apartment. They took Clara in for questioning. How could you do this to us?" His words tumbled out, a torrent of accusations, but beneath them, I detected a tremor of genuine fear. I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "David," I said, my voice calm, almost detached, "I reported a theft. My jewelry box was emptied. Those were priceless heirlooms, gifts from your father, from my parents. I told the police who I suspected, based on your wife's previous comments and your evasiveness." There was a moment of shocked silence on his end. You actually called the police on your own son?" he stammered, the disbelief palpable. "On Clara? Mom, this is insane. We didn't do anything. Clara might have looked at them, but she would. Never!" His denial was weak, unconvincing, crumbling under the weight of his own panic. "David," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. "The police don't just search apartments and take people in for questioning based on a hunch. They must have found something. They must have evidence." He responded with a guttural sound, a mix of frustration and despair, before hanging up abruptly. A few hours later, Detective Miller, the officer I had spoken with, called. His tone was somber, professional. "Mrs. Thorne, we visited your son and daughter-in-law this morning. We found several pawnshop receipts during our search, matching descriptions of your pearl necklace and sapphire ring. Ms. Sterling initially denied any knowledge, claiming she thought they were costume jewelry or gifts from a friend. But the pawnshop owner identified her from surveillance footage and confirmed she sold them a few weeks ago. The locket was not among the items recovered, but it's likely it was sold elsewhere or discarded." A cold, heavy certainty settled over me. There it was, undeniable proof. Clara had sold them. The locket, my precious locket with David's baby hair, likely tossed aside as worthless. My heart hardened another degree. "What happens now, Detective?" I asked, my voice flat. He explained that Clara Sterling was being formally charged with grand larceny and possession of stolen property. They would also be investigating David's potential involvement, given the circumstances and his living situation. He asked if I wished to pursue the charges. The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Do I wish to pursue the charges? It wasn't a question of desire, it was a question of justice. For my parents, for Michael, and most agonizingly, for the integrity of the love I had given David. "Yes, Detective," I finally said, my voice unwavering. "I do. I want to press charges." With those words, a definitive line was drawn, a bridge burned. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this decision would irrevocably alter the landscape of my life, and David's forever. The news spread through our small social circle like wildfire, fueled by gossip and amplified by Clara's now defunct social media presence. David and Clara, once the epitome of aspirational living, became the subject of whispered conversations and pointed stares. Their carefully constructed facade of effortless wealth and success crumbled publicly, spectacularly. Clara, whose entire identity revolved around her curated online image, was utterly devastated. Her Instagram account, once a vibrant gallery of luxury, went dark, then was deleted entirely. Her sponsors pulled out, her collaborations vanished, and the illusion she had so meticulously built evaporated into thin air. David, meanwhile, was caught in the eye of the storm. He was questioned extensively by the police, his name publicly linked to the charges against Clara. Although he wasn't directly charged with the theft, the evidence pointed solely to Clara as the one who pawned the items. The investigation exposed the true fragility of their financial situation. His junior consultant job, already tenuous, couldn't withstand the public scandal. He was eventually let go, his company image shattered beyond repair. His calls to me became less frequent, more desperate, oscillating between furious accusations and tearful pleas for me to make this go away. "Mom, please, just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you found them," he begged one day, his voice thick with tears. "Clara is furious. She's saying terrible things. Our lives are ruined. You have to fix this." His words were like daggers, reminding me that even in the face of his own dire circumstances, his primary concern was still external, still about fixing an image, rather than confronting the profound moral failing. "David," I said, my voice weary, "there's nothing for me to fix. You and Clara created this situation. You lived off my generosity and then stole from me. The only thing you can do now is face the consequences and learn from them." He hung up, leaving me with the familiar, aching silence. The legal proceedings were protracted and emotionally draining. I had to testify, to recount the story of my stolen heirlooms, to publicly state my suspicion of Clara, and to explain the immense sentimental value of the pieces. Sitting in that courtroom, looking at Clara's defiant, often tearful face and catching glimpses of David, pale and withdrawn in the gallery, was agonizing. It felt like tearing open old wounds, publicly exposing the raw, ugly truth of a family fractured by greed and disrespect. Clara, guided by her lawyer, maintained her plea of not guilty, claiming she truly believed the items were costume jewelry left behind by a friend, or perhaps even a gift from me. But the pawnshop records, her distinct identification from surveillance, and my clear testimony about the irreplaceable nature of the pieces painted a damning picture. The judge, after hearing all the evidence, found Clara Sterling guilty of grand larceny. She received a sentence of probation, community service, and a significant financial restitution order to me, along with a permanent criminal record. The court also ordered the return of the recovered items, the pearl necklace and the sapphire ring, though they looked duller, somehow tarnished by their journey through the pawnshop. The locket was never found. The judge's words echoed in the courtroom. The betrayal of trust, especially within a family, is a crime that leaves scars far deeper than any financial loss. As for David, without direct evidence of his involvement, in the physical act of pawning the items, he was not charged. But the reputational damage and the exposure of his financial dependency were punishments in themselves. Returning home after the verdict, the 2 recovered pieces felt heavy in my hands. I placed them back in the empty wooden box, their presence a stark reminder of what had transpired. The locket's absence was a continuous, dull ache, a symbol of the irreplaceable part of my past that had been carelessly discarded. The material, items were back, yes, but the innocence, the trust, the untainted joy associated with them were gone forever. The aftermath of the court case was a period of profound reevaluation for me. The weight of their betrayal, the public spectacle, and the difficult choices I had made had left me emotionally scarred. But it had also forged a new resolve within me. I realized that for years I had allowed my love for David to become a source of my own diminishment. I had confused enablement with love, and in doing so had harmed us both. This painful rupture, though devastating, was also a liberation. I was free from the constant anxiety of their next financial crisis, free from the thinly veiled disrespect, free from the silent expectation that I would always be there to pick up the pieces of their reckless choices. My life, after the storm, began to bloom anew. I re-engaged with my financial advisor, Charlotte, not just to manage the court-ordered restitution, which I fully intended to donate to a charity supporting victims of financial abuse, but to entirely restructure my own future. We invested in my retirement, planned for home renovations I had long dreamed of, and, most importantly, allocated funds for a life of purpose and personal fulfillment. I took up painting classes, a hobby I had abandoned decades ago, rediscovering a vibrant, creative spark. I volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding immense comfort and joy in unconditional love. And finally, I booked the trip of a lifetime, a guided tour through the ancient ruins of Greece, a dream I had held since my college days. It was an act of self-care, a conscious decision to pour into myself the same dedication and love I had so freely given to others. The relationship with David was irrevocably altered. For a long time, there was only silence, broken occasionally by bitter, resentful messages from him, still unable to comprehend the magnitude of his actions or my decision. He and Clara eventually divorced, the weight of their financial ruin, and the public shame proving too much for their foundation of manufactured appearances. Clara, her influencer career a distant memory, faded from public view, a cautionary tale of greed. David, however, embarked on a long, arduous journey of self-discovery. Stripped of my financial safety net and Clara's extravagant expectations, he was forced to confront the harsh realities of independent living. He took on odd jobs, learned to budget, and slowly, painfully, began to understand the value of honest work and the true cost of his previous lifestyle. He struggled, he stumbled, but gradually he started to rebuild. The first sign of genuine change came in a letter, not a text or a call, but a handwritten letter. It was clumsy, filled with apologies, and, for the first time, a profound acknowledgement of his past mistakes and the pain he had caused. He didn't ask for money or forgiveness. He simply expressed remorse and a dawning understanding of the lessons he was learning. Years passed. David found a job as a graphic designer for a small, ethical company, a role that allowed him to use his creative talents without the pressures of maintaining an unsustainable image. He met Sarah, a kind and grounded woman who valued integrity and genuine connection over superficial wealth. Their life was modest, but rich in shared laughter, mutual respect, and quiet contentment. Slowly, painstakingly, David and I began to rebuild our relationship. It was a new relationship, one founded not on my financial support, but on mutual respect, honest communication, and the painful lessons learned. One day, he visited me, his eyes filled with tears, not of anger, but of deep gratitude. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you for being strong enough to let me fall. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through, but it was the only way I truly learned." It was a healing moment, a balm for the wounds of the past, a testament to the enduring power of tough love. Even after David's apology and our slow reconciliation, the shadows of those years never fully vanished. There were nights when I would wake suddenly, my chest tight, as if I had just relived the moment I discovered the empty jewelry box. Grief does not leave neatly when the case is closed or when restitution is paid. It lingers like a faint scar, under the skin, invisible to others but always felt by the one who carries it. I found myself revisiting memories of my parents, their unwavering honesty, and wondering what they would think of the choices I made. I often pictured my father's steady hands carving that wooden box, or my mother's gentle smile as she clasped the pearls around her neck. In those reflections, I realized that pressing charges had not only honored my own dignity, but also protected the legacy of the values they had entrusted to me. There were also moments when loneliness struck me with brutal force. Friends offered support, yes, but few could understand the unique devastation of standing against your own child in court. Sometimes, when I saw mothers at the park with their grown children, laughing and sharing carefree moments, I felt a pang of envy. My story was different. My bond with David had been tested in ways most people never imagine. Yet in that pain, I found a strange kind of pride. I had not allowed love to blind me forever. I had chosen respect for myself, for the memories of those who came before me, and ultimately for David too, even when he could not yet see it. Slowly, I began to notice subtle transformations within myself. I walked taller, spoke with more certainty, and no longer felt the quiet desperation to please everyone around me. Setting that boundary, as agonizing as it had been, had unlocked a strength I hadn't known I possessed. My story was not just about betrayal, but about reclaiming agency, about refusing to let manipulation dictate the terms of my life. And in that transformation, I discovered a deeper truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not protection, but allowing another to face the mirror of their own actions, no matter how shattering the reflection may be. The pearl necklace and the sapphire ring still sat in my wooden jewelry box. They were no longer just symbols of the past. They were now also symbols of my resilience, my courage to stand up for myself, and the arduous but ultimately redemptive journey of forgiveness and growth. The locket remained lost, a small, persistent reminder that some losses cannot be fully recovered, but that life, stripped bare of illusions, can still be rebuilt with dignity and truth. I had lost priceless heirlooms, yes, but I had regained something far more valuable: my peace, my self-respect, and the profound wisdom that true love sometimes means saying no, even when it breaks your own heart. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced the agonizing choice between protecting a loved one and upholding your own dignity, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any inspiring and real stories like this one. Click the notification bell to be notified whenever a new video is released. Leave a like if you believe that justice, even when painful, ultimately paves the way for healing and growth. And if you know someone who needs to hear this powerful message of resilience and the courage to set boundaries, someone who might be grappling with difficult family dynamics, please share this video with them. And now, the most important question. Have you ever had to draw a difficult line with someone you loved when their actions crossed into unacceptable territory? What was the hardest part of that decision? And what did you learn about yourself in the process? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could be the next one to inspire someone, giving them the courage they need to stand up for themselves. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.